It's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories this morning. Ethnic cleansing. The United States condemns ongoing violence in Ethiopia, which has forced 300,000 people to leave their homes.
New camp residents are arriving all the time, although I don't think you can call this a displacement camp. It's more like a test of human endurance.
Hopes for the high street. The government promises millions to help devastated businesses get ready for the end of lockdown. An emergency break. Germany on the brink of tougher COVID restrictions after the country was hit by a further wave of infections. Still barred. We report on the crisis in the pub industry 1 year after they were first told to close their doors. In sport, Fulham's Premier League survival hopes suffer a blow with defeat to Leeds.
Will there be some spring sunshine? I'll have the answer for you later in the programme.
And at 1:45, we'll take a look at the newspapers with the editor of the Young People's News site, Challenges Northern Ireland, Thomas Copeland, and the broadcaster and journalist, Afia Adon. Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Thank you for joining us. The numbers are huge and still growing. More than 500,000 people are now in internal exile in Ethiopia, forced from their homes by warfare into camps, unable to cope under the weight of numbers. Months of conflict between Ethiopia's National Defence Force and fighters from the Tigray People's Liberation Front have created a catastrophic human crisis, seen firsthand by a Sky News team. The violence in the Tigray region began in November. The United Nations estimates more than 500,000 people have been displaced, and nearly 60,000 refugees have fled to neighbouring Sudan. Earlier this week, our Africa correspondent and his team were the first TV journalists to visit the villages south of the regional capital, Mekelle, where locals claim massacres have occurred. They've now travelled to North Shere, where a catastrophic humanitarian situation is unfolding. This is John Sparks' report.
There is an elementary school in Shure that offers some sort of sanctuary, a place of refuge for people on the run. But they have arrived in a city now gripped by a humanitarian emergency, and there is little here to keep them alive.
There is no food, and there is no shelter, and there is no the basic needs. So, if you can, you have to address the world to come soon.
A human tide of 300,000 are now camping in this beleaguered city after a hazardous journey from western Tigray. And many here, both young and old, are struggling.
How are you? Tell me how you're feeling.
Some have been forced to flee their homes. Others have been banished by militias from the neighbouring region of Amhara. The US government has called it ethnic cleansing. Leti Teweldebrahan and her daughter have just arrived in Shure.
This must be a really difficult time for you.
She's a civil servant from a city called Humera, and she says she's lost everything she owns.
Do you know where you are going to sleep tonight?
There's not much space at Sahaya Elementary, and conditions at 5 other camps in the city are the same. The air filled with smoke and the continuous sound of people coughing.
It's so claustrophobic in here, there's barely any room to move inside, and new camp residents are arriving all the time, although I don't think you can call this a displacement camp. It's more like a test of human endurance.
How are you feeling?
No food, no services at this elementary school. 28-year-old Fitsum Teklahaimanot suffers from a mental illness, and his father, a priest, has decided to keep him in chains. It's the only way they can cope. Aid organizations weren't permitted in Shure until recently, and the local hospital can't meet demand. This is the corridor off the main reception. They are short of beds and routine medication, like basic pain relief. This man was stitched up without an anesthetic during our visit.
They know the 30 among the 50-something.
The war in Tigray has put everyone under terrible pressure, says the director.
As a physicians, we are doing our best, but it's really harsh. The environment is harsh, the time is harsh. And still our staffs are also, still they have this psychological trauma, including me, psychological trauma, because one of our best pharmacy staff was killed with his family by air troops.
Gunshot wounds and shrapnel injuries have become a matter of routine, but some patients can't just be patched up. 8-year-old Al Abraham was shot in the head by militiamen in western Tigray. His mother, grandmother and brother were killed.
I don't have an idea because he's too young, he's 8 years old. Later on, his little brother is 5 years old, killed by them. Even they thought that this was already dead, but later on, as you can see, there is two sides of the injury. You can see one was it's a bullet injury, and it was in, and by that side it was also the bullet was get out with it.
They've been caught in the middle of a battle for power, and the war in Tigray will never leave them. John Sparks, Sky News in Shure.
After a year in which more than 41,000 retail jobs were lost, the government has pledged extra funding to smarten up town centres for the end of lockdown. But with non-essential shops still weeks away from reopening, tourism officials say struggling towns could need more money. Milena Veselinovic reports from Somerset.
Paul Batts' shop has everything you need for an outdoor adventure. The store has supplied equipment for trips to Mount Everest, Kilimanjaro and Ben Nevis. But in a year when most of us have been staying at home, the business has struggled.
We've lost all our key customers because, Duke of Edinburgh Award was cancelled, 10 Tours was cancelled, scouting's been on halt, and a lot of our customers are travelling the world all the time. We're equipping people for adventures all over the world normally, and that's just not happening.
This is just one of the shops in the seaside town of Weston-super-Mare struggling to stay afloat in the pandemic. Retail is one of the industries worst hit by COVID. Almost 10,000 chain stores disappeared in 2020 and over 41,500 people in the sector lost their jobs. But today, the government has announced new funding for high streets and coastal towns, hoping to give them a boost ahead of summer.
We're providing over £55 million so that councils can give that money to high streets, to town centres, to city centres, the length and breadth of the country, and that they can use it to tidy up, to plant, to invest in new seating, to market and advertise their high streets, and to lay on some great events this spring and summer so that we can all get back out, back those independent retailers.
The money is a good start, those in the tourism industry say, but it doesn't go far enough to cover the huge losses caused by the pandemic.
We saw about 70% of our turnover, our business, completely wiped out over that period of time, which has been an absolute, it's just been devastating for us. However, we're now seeing that pent-up demand, and we're hoping to see a resurgence coming back through for this particular summer.
As shops and pubs prepare to reopen in April, there's optimism that warmer weather and shrinking virus numbers will bring customers. But recovery can only start, business owners say, if this lockdown truly is the last one. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
Germany appears likely to introduce tougher lockdown restrictions as it struggles with a growing number of coronavirus cases. The Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has said the government will have to apply what she called an emergency brake. A 3-day pause in the vaccination programme and a slow take-up rate means just 8% of the population have received the injection, far below rates in Britain and the United States. The Department of Health has released the latest coronavirus figures in the UK. There were under 5,000 new COVID-19 cases reported, with 101 more deaths across the UK. That takes the total number of people who've died to 126,026, and 26.26 million first doses of a vaccine have now been given. And our political correspondent Rob Powell joins me now from Westminster. And Rob, with this new wave of COVID-19 in Europe, just how worried are the government here?
I think they'll be very alert to what's going on the continent, Gillian, because remember, think back to September last year and the beginning of the second wave, and a precursor to cases rising in the UK was an increase in cases in countries like France and Germany. Of course, the key difference this time round is the vaccine and the high level, relatively anyway, of adults in the UK that have had the vaccine so far. Of course, we saw the Prime Minister getting his first jab of the AstraZeneca vaccine yesterday. Almost 50%, on track to reach 50% in the coming days of adults in the UK will have received the jab. You compare that to the EU, where the number on average is around 12%. So I think even if cases go up, and I think the expectation is they probably will in the coming weeks and months here as restrictions are eased, the vaccine will break that link between cases rising and hospitalisations and deaths rising as well. I think what maybe is a concern when you look at international travel, though, is the risk of variants, new variants of the virus coming into the country that are potentially more resistant to the vaccine. We heard yesterday from one member of the government's scientific advisory panel, Professor Neil Ferguson, who said he was concerned about the number of cases of the variant first identified in South Africa that were circulating in France. He said that the government should perhaps think about putting France on that red list of countries where there's mandatory quarantine in hotels when you get back. Now, no indication from the government as yet that it is going to put countries like France on that list, but we have heard in the past that they will not hesitate to act quickly if there is a need to tighten border restrictions. Non-essential international travel is due to start at the earliest from mid-May. A task force at the moment is looking at how that can happen. I think if there is a fresh wave of COVID raging on the continent and a high prevalence of new variants, you would imagine some level of restrictions to stay in place.
Rob, thank you. Let's go back now to one of our top stories this morning, and plans by the government to give around £56 million to help the UK's high streets. Let's speak to Adrian Waddell, Chief Executive of NE1 Limited, which supports Newcastle's business district. First of all, tell us about the work that NE1 does and how you support the local economy.
Good morning. We are the City Centre's business improvement district company, so we represent around 1,400 businesses in Newcastle and have done since 2009.
Sorry, your sound was breaking up a little bit there, but you were saying that you support local business. How has the last year been for you?
It's been pretty desperate. I mean, we are made of resilient stuff in Newcastle. And we've been in and out of lockdown in many cases longer than other parts of the UK. And of course, all eyes are on the 12th of April and really looking forward to getting out, getting going and welcoming customers back into town.
What exactly have businesses been up against and what sort of changes have they made? How have they had to adapt to the situation they find themselves in?
I mean, I think as we've seen across the country, lots of businesses have had to close, they've had to remodel their offer. And of course, in a busy city centre, a lot of offices have been away and still are away. Hospitality largely has been closed. And the challenge really, and also the great opportunity for us, we hope on the 12th of April and afterwards, is being able to welcome people back into the city centre. And businesses have been incredibly resilient about how they're going to do that. And there's been a lot of investment in internal spaces, in planning, including with the City Council, about how we can make the most of outdoor spaces and get the city really looking its best and attractive and welcoming and open again.
So I guess you'll support this government initiative of 56 million to welcome welcome customers back and to help businesses to do that.
There's a lot of that work is going on at the moment. And of course, to be honest, I don't imagine 56 million, when you divvy that up across the country, actually is going to mean an awful lot more for us. I don't know how much we're going to get in Newcastle. I hope we'll get some of it, but we will just get on with things anyway. And all of our businesses really have already got very mature and practiced plans to make sure that we can get people back into town, back into shops, back into businesses safely. And we're really looking forward to the opportunity to do that.
Do you think the 56 million isn't enough? From the sounds of it, you're suggesting that it might not be.
I don't know how much of that we're going to see in Newcastle. I think generally across the piece, the government support has been extremely good. There are sectors of the economy who are really scraping. You take nightclubs, for example, who have been shut for a year, and they only really started to get some meaningful help in November. And a lot of that, for a lot of them, that barely touches the sides when you look at their fixed property costs. So it's still extremely difficult for a lot of businesses.
Yes, you can see how that is the case. In terms of the high street, though, how do you see it changing and, changing in order to survive it in the future? Are we just really going to keep on using online businesses? Is that the future?
I think over the last year, we've sort of seen probably 7 years worth of impact on the retail sector. And really what towns and cities have got to do quickly is to evolve so that the quality of the offer, how a city curates itself to provide different things for different parts of the community, all of that's got to happen pretty quickly. And certainly in Newcastle, we have got fantastic plans coming forward. We've just launched a £50 million vision for the city centre that'll be rolled out over the next 10 years. But actually, we're going to see, £20 million worth of that investment coming forward over the next sort of 18 months to 24 months. So it's really, really exciting, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
You do sound very optimistic about the future, are you?
Yes, I absolutely am. I mean, obviously, I would say that, wouldn't I? But there's huge pent-up demand, I think, amongst businesses to get going, to do what they do best. They're vibrant organisations, and they want to get their customers back, and they want to do what they do best and know how to do. So we're looking forward to April and getting going again. Can't wait.
Brilliant. Great to end on a positive note. Adrian Waddell, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Also making the news today, a volcano has erupted near Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, following thousands of small earthquakes in recent weeks. Streams of lava have been seen at the Fagradal mountain volcano, which last erupted 800 years ago. The city is just 20 miles away, and officials say they expect gas pollution to spread across the country's southern coast. Beautiful but deadly. Australia's east coast has been hit by severe flooding after record-breaking rainfall. Evacuation orders have been issued in New South Wales, and authorities have asked people in Sydney to stay at home. Naz is here with the weather now. I've got 2 words for you. Nawruz Mubarak.
Oh, thank you. I thought you were going to be rude.
No. Explain what they mean.
Oh, Nowruz Mubarak. It's Happy New Year in Farsi. That's the Iranian language. And that's because today at 9:37 a.m. it's the spring equinox, which is the start of the Iranian New Year. So, Salano Mubarak.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So today is the spring equinox this morning, and we are going to see some good spells of spring sunshine out there as well. But there will still be a fair amount of cloud around with some drizzle too. So it's a real mixture of conditions. This morning it's sunny, but it's chilly with the local frost across central, southern and eastern parts of Scotland, parts of northern England, down towards the southeast of England. There is a bit of brightness too. Fairly cloudy elsewhere with some patches of mist and fog out towards the west. Now, going into this afternoon, there will still be large amounts of cloud around, and where the cloud gets thick enough, there may be a bit of drizzle as well. But the cloud will tend to break at times, so I think there'll be a bit of brightness later, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands, the southwest of England, central and southern parts of Ireland. But the southeast, I think, will tend to cloud over, although Kent will probably still hold on to some sunshine. The best of the sunny spells will be across the northeast of England and for most of the day across central, southern and eastern Scotland. But across northern Scotland, there will be a front approaching there with brisk winds, and that will sink some cloud towards central parts of Scotland later, where it will turn a little bit hazy with that sunshine too.
It's now been a year since pubs were first forced to close their doors due to the pandemic. In that time, almost 10,000 licensed premises, including pubs, clubs and restaurants, closed permanently. At the end of January, more than 4 million jobs were still furloughed. And 68% of employers using the furlough scheme were from accommodation and food services, the highest of any sector. Katerina Vitozzi reports on the industry's struggle for survival.
At the heart of this rural Derbyshire village is its pub. But a year ago today, everything stopped.
I mean, we've been abreast of the news, so we knew that things were starting to get bad. It still never felt like a shutdown was coming. And yeah, the realisation, kind of brutal. And we thought weeks, not months, not a year.
Because of local tier restrictions, this pub was last open in early November, a punishing closure that at times felt unsurvivable.
So it's been like 15, 20 years of building this business up to what it is now, and we have 68 staff, I think, on furlough currently, but the team's bigger than that still, if we take in the sort of students that come back at the summer, and yeah, it's kind of been brutal. And we've taken on significant amount of debt to have us come through this, but we're confident we'll bring it back, but it doesn't make it any less painful or difficult.
Thanks to furlough support, takeaway options and sheer will, this pub is getting ready to reopen. But around 2,000 venues won't. Without more financial support, industry bodies say others will follow.
The support that is required for pubs and many industries, not just pubs, but particularly pubs and hospitality, is going to be needed for, I believe, years to come. There are a lot of pubs out there that are going to be opening into a very uncertain environment. Our customer base have got used to drinking at home, and we don't know whether they're necessarily all going to come back.
The next few months are critical. See these tents, they've been put up to boost numbers for outdoor drinking and dining come mid-April, whatever the weather.
We don't know what we're going to open to, how busy or whatever, so we're just making sure that we start slowly and kind of, and then sort of build it back up.
And that will be key here and elsewhere in a year where so many things have changed. Will our drinking habits be yet another? Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News in Derbyshire.
Following the killing of George Floyd in the United States, one response was a series of global bakery sales to raise money to support the black community. Next week, London Bakers Against Racism will be holding their biggest sale so far as they raise funds for a project to address a lack of black history in schools. Well, Maxine Monu of a Den Bake shop in Harlesden in northwest London joins me now. Good morning to you. First of all, tell me how London Bakers Against Racism came about and what exactly it is that you're trying to do.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So London Bakers Against Racism came about because two different sets of people, one in northeast London, one in northwest London, saw what was happening. We all had a very visceral response to the murder of George Floyd. Bakers Against Racism began in DC in the United States, and we basically picked up the mantle over here. So back in June, we had 2 sales. And as you said, this is our biggest sale ever. We came together for Black History Month as well. And now we have our 4 London hubs, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, and Southwest, and this is our biggest ever sale on Live Now.
So exactly how does it work? How do people get involved?
So people visit our website, it's Bakers Against Racism, ldn.co.uk. They select their collection hub, which are the Lockdown Bakehouse in Wandsworth, Brown and Green Life in Crystal Palace Park, The Hearth in Northwest London, Queen's Park, or Esther's Cafe in Stoke Newington. And they buy. So bakers across London, pro bakers and very seasoned home bakers have donated their bakes. And we're pre-selling everything, and then customers can come and collect it on Sunday, the 28th of March, from one of those hubs.
So you have amateurs contributing as well, not just professional bakers?
We say amateurs, but, these are people that have been, selling on the side. They're just not registered food businesses. A lot of people have had to pivot very hard during this lockdown. So you have pro pastry chefs who haven't been able to find another role, who've now kind of set up on their own, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's predominantly pro bakers and pro pastry chefs who are doing this on the side, and everybody is donating fully without sponsorship, and everybody's just doing this because we really feel like we need to do something to combat racism in this country.
So I won't be sending you any of my baking then. You'll be saved that.
Everything's thoroughly checked.
What are you insinuating? What exactly is the money going to be used for that you're hoping to raise?
So this time we are raising funds for the Black curriculum, and they are a group of relatively young folks, actually young Black women predominantly, who have been really pushing to get Black history taught in the national curriculum, making it mandatory. At the moment, schools can adopt parts, and most schools will make a big push during Black History Month, but obviously there is a lot of history of Black people in the UK that is just simply not in history books, doesn't appear in the curriculum, and doesn't help in terms of understanding the contribution that Black people have made to this country, and therefore combating racism too.
You said that London Bakers Against Racism followed on from the American project. What would you say to those that say that racism and the issues surrounding it really is an American problem and doesn't exist in the UK?
There are a lot of those people that still feel that way. I'm hopeful that events over the past year have at least begun to open their eyes. It's not the same. We didn't have the slave trade here, but, Britain did a really good job, unfortunately, of just exporting those problems and kind of doing the dirty work elsewhere. I am here because Britain was there. I am here because Britain was in the Jamaica. My husband is here because Britain was in Nigeria. There's any number of things you can point to that wouldn't exist but for empire, including the Industrial Revolution. We don't talk about those things in the context of the slave trade, and we also don't talk about Black history outside the context of the slave trade. So there's a lot of evidence. I think there's a point at which people choose not to recognise that racism is systemic and really needs firm addressing here in the UK.
And in essence, it's not actually Black history, it's all of our history, isn't it? I wonder if you could just tell us what you'll be baking today to make us all hungry.
So for me, I'm offering a box of macarons, so pistachio and mango, chocolate and salted caramel macarons. I'm doing original nutter cake and carrot cake too, but there's plenty on sale. Still, we're still going. And if you can't get to the sale yourself, you can always make a donation through our invisible cookies on our website.
And what time did you say my parcel would be arriving?
Unfortunately, I didn't. You'll have to come see us and get it, Amelia.
I'd love to do that. I'd love to order some of that in. I want to thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you very much.
You are watching Sky News Breakfast. Much more still to come. Do stay tuned.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Very good morning to you. Today is the spring equinox and there will be some spring sunshine about, particularly across northern and eastern areas, but there is going to be a fair amount of cloud around for today generally. In fact, it's quite cloudy out there this morning. There's some drizzle where the cloud is thick enough, some patches of mist and fog out towards the west, but there's a bit of brightness down towards the southeast where it's a chilly start with the local frost, and over central, southern, eastern Scotland and northeast England there is also some sunshine, but it's chilly with frosty conditions. Now through today these spots will continue to see the best of any sunshine, although it does start to cloud over across parts of the southeast, but I think Kent will just about hold on to some brightness, and a bit of brightness will develop where the cloud breaks at times over Wales, the Midlands, the southwest and central and southern parts of Ireland, but predominantly cloudy over these areas. Central, southern and eastern Scotland will see good sunny spells too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It's at 7:43. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up after the break, we'll take you through the stories making this morning's newspapers. Do stay with us.
When the industry shut down over a year ago now, there was a situation quickly developed where there's going to be a catastrophic loss of skills, knowledge and experience in the live music industry. This is about audio, lighting, video, pyro, stage building, highly skilled technicians who haven't worked in the industry for over a year, and no live show is going to happen without these highly skilled technicians. And the support is about putting the necessary structures in place so that they can come back to live music from maybe stacking shelves or driving delivery trucks, whatever it may be. The live music industry is so important to this country. It's a 1.3 billion contribution to the GDP of the country. The music industry itself is 5.2 billion in the UK, and as I say, we're potentially facing a catastrophic loss of skills with these highly skilled technicians. The live industry isn't going to come back immediately after June the 21st at the earliest. It's going to be a very slow process, and initially it's only going to be domestic activity. And if you think that for a medium to large size gig, to put 5 people on the stage is approximately 200 crew members. And those 200 crew members, without which the live music scene, which we all love so much, which gives so much value and meaning to our lives, is not going to exist. And that, as I say, the knowledge and experience of these members, of these crew members, is absolutely incredible. And the British music industry is going to be at a severe loss if they don't return to the industry. And the support that we're raising funds for, so it's on the Just Giving page if you just look for UK Metal Merger. The support is to provide all the necessary means for them to return to live music. And it's not just financial support. There's mental health support, stagehand, train people in mental health first aid, and they also provide addiction rehabilitation in rare cases. And it's a really, really important organisation.
Did you know if more of us walked, rode bikes and scooted to school, we would make a big difference to the air pollution around our school? Yeah, like us.
There will be largely cloudy skies today with some drizzle in places too, as well as rain spreading southwards from northern Scotland. However, there will be sunny spells at times across central, southern and eastern Scotland, as well as northeast England, and there will be a bit of brightness for Kent, Wales, the Midlands and southern parts of Ireland too. So in regards to the air pollution levels today, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very high, most places will remain at a low level of 1 to 3 again. However, there may be isolated pockets of moderate air pollution around urban areas and busy roadside locations in the light winds.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Welcome back with us this morning again to take us through the newspapers. The editor of the Young People's News site, Challenges Northern Ireland, that's Thomas Copeland, and the broadcaster and journalist, Afia Adom. Welcome back to you both. Starting with you, Thomas, first of all, and the Telegraph, and they're reporting on Nicola Sturgeon's continued woes. And this is the reporting to come of the second report into whether she misled Parliament.
That's right. The Sturgeon Salmond crisis is just getting messier and messier, Gillian. It's turning into a political knife fight. So this is a report due to be published on Tuesday. It looks like it's going to say that Sturgeon did mislead Parliament, but it'll stop short of saying whether she did so knowingly. And that's very critical in terms of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. SNP committee members already accusing their opposition colleagues of forcing through prejudicial assertions based on political connivance and prejudicial opinions, basically, on Nicola Sturgeon. Now, it is obviously the case that, the Tories, for example, from the beginning have said that they thought that Sturgeon was in the wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that the conclusions of the committee aren't valid. The problem with all of this for Nicola Sturgeon is twofold. One, in kind of deriding the conclusions that are coming out of this committee, the SNP leader has placed even more emphasis on the report that's due to be published from James Hamilton, who is the former head of prosecutions for Ireland, actually, as to whether she broke the Ministerial Code of Conduct. And by placing more emphasis there, it means that if that doesn't go her way, she doesn't really have anywhere to hide. And the other problem is that this entire sorry affair has created, I think, a kind of aura of scandal, ever so slight toxicity around the SNP just before walking into an election cycle. Has that tainted Nicola Sturgeon? I don't know, but what I do know is that the SNP will do basically anything to keep her in place. She's a star player. She is a world-class politician. I think objectively a lot of people can say that. She's been hugely influential for the independence movement, and they will do almost anything to keep her in place, including delegitimizing the findings of a parliamentary committee.
And as you say, she is the star of the SNP. There doesn't seem to be another name in the frame, does there? Let's move to The Guardian, Afia. This story about Black history being made compulsory on the curriculum in Welsh schools.
Absolutely. So, like you said there, Gillian, all Welsh pupils are to be taught about racism and the contributions of Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and that's according to the Welsh devolved government. So this is something that people have been campaigning for a long time. There was an upsurge in petitions last year with the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement that Black history, which is all of our history, to be honest, should be taught in schools. And I think this is really important to do because, like I said, this is British history. This is all of our history, not just Black history. And it's also very important to recognise the contributions of Black and Asian community and other people of colours communities' contributions to the United Kingdom over the years beyond slavery and beyond colonialism. And a lot of the conversations that we have around Black history tend to be only those things. And I think it's really important that children in school learn about more than these things. Another part of what's being made compulsory is that they're going to have more training for Black and minority ethnic teachers to go into schools, so to encourage more of them to be in schools. And that's really important for Black children, for children of colour, to see people like them in education, as well as more support for those teachers in schools as well. So I think this has been a long time coming. It's great that the devolved government in Wales have put this into practice, that it's going to be compulsory. And this is something that I would like to see rolled out across the United Kingdom, because like I said, Black history, Asian history and minority ethnic history is just part of British history and should be taught beyond racism, beyond colonialism, in all of our schools.
And significant for all children. Thomas, to The Times, and Dominic Cummings is going to be spilling more beans.
It's the great return of Dominic Cummings. The Times have a wonderful story of the pandemic. They call it a timeline. You can see a bit of it there, I think, on your screen at the moment. Dominic Cummings has confirmed that he's going to be appearing in front of a joint committee of MPs to investigate lessons that should be learnt from COVID-19. This is the first of what will undoubtedly be a great many number of inquiries into actions that were made by the government over the course of this pandemic. It all comes down, in this case, to decisions that were made in early September, around 5 days, as to whether the UK should enter a short, sharp lockdown at that stage, rather than about a month and a half later, as it eventually ended up happening. Cummings, we are told, was at the forefront of advocating for this short, sharp lockdown. The charge really is that Boris Johnson, according to him and his allies, dithered and delayed, was concerned about the economy, was concerned about his backbench MPs, wasn't convinced that the lockdown was the most successful way of keeping hold of this virus. I think, there are two things here. One, how much of this is spin? We don't really know. Dominic Cummings was, of course, fired in the end, or let go from number 10 Downing Street particularly, after the Barnard Castle incident. Some people accusing him of trying to rewrite history. The other thing is, will it make any real difference? My feeling is probably that it won't. Boris Johnson's in a positive place when it comes to political opinion at the moment. The sun's shining on him a little bit. Those are the words that are used in the article, with the vaccine rollout going quite well. People are looking upon him favourably. A lot of that is down to things like the vaccine, and there's objective analysis here as well. For example, Wales entered into that short, sharp lockdown at the time that Dominic Cummings was advocating for it in England, and they didn't really see a large difference in terms of the number of cases that came out at the other end. I think the reality is, the people who hated Dominic Cummings beforehand will hate him at the end. The people who loved Boris beforehand will love him at the end. I wonder, though, as I finish, how many people who have described Dominic Cummings in the past as being not credible, a liar, perhaps somebody who was just hungry for power, will be taking his word in the inquiry as gospel. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yes, we shall indeed. Just quickly, time for this last story. I definitely don't agree with this. This is a recommendation to get rid of children's school uniforms by a crossbench peer. I say no. What do you say, Afia?
I say no as well, Gillian. So this actually started because the House of Lords yesterday were having a debate on a proposed law to make uniforms more affordable, which I actually think is really important, because especially if you have to buy your school uniform from a specialist school shop, it can be much more expensive than buying generic school uniform up and down the high street. And if you've got more than one child, that back to school uniform shop can be super expensive. So the Earl of Clancarty yesterday in the House of Lords proposed that actually we should get rid of school uniforms. Now, we know that school uniforms are a great leveler. Everybody goes to school wearing the same thing. And what we don't want is for children to feel that they don't have the latest gear, the latest trainers, latest jeans, the latest tracksuits, and that can lead to bullying. Now, the Earl of Clancarty said that his 16-year-old daughter had said to him that she's glad that she has a way to express herself by not wearing school uniform. And I do think that's a point that needs to be taken on board.
Definitely.
However, like I said,
uniforms
it's a great
are a yes from me. I think they should stay. Thomas and Afia, see you in an hour's time.